Number 1. From empty islands to the world stage. A few weeks ago, millions of football fans around the world heard a name they had rarely noticed before: Cape Verde. How could a tiny island nation with just over 530,000 people stand on the biggest stage in world football at the FIFA World Cup 2026? Even more surprising, this wasn't just a symbolic appearance. It was Cape Verde's first ever World Cup, and they shocked the world by advancing beyond the group stage. They held football giants Spain and Uruguay to draws, then pushed defending champions Argentina into extra time before narrowly losing 3-2 because of a heartbreaking own goal in the final moments. Overnight, the world wanted to know one question: where is Cape Verde? Before we continue, I'm curious, where are you watching from and what time is it where you are right now? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to see how many different countries are joining us on this journey. But here's something even more incredible. Long before Cape Verde became one of football's biggest surprises, it was something almost impossible to imagine. Unlike nearly every other country on Earth, these islands had no indigenous people. For millions of years, no human beings lived here at all. There were no villages, no kingdoms, no ancient civilizations. Only volcanic islands rising from the Atlantic Ocean, shaped by wind waves and fire. It wasn't until the 15th century that Portuguese explorers arrived and established the first permanent settlements. In other words, every Cape Verdean alive today traces their nation's story back to people who came from somewhere else. An entire country, an entire culture, and an entire national identity had to be built from the ground up. And those islands themselves are extraordinary. Cape Verde is not part of the African mainland. It is an isolated archipelago of 10 volcanic islands, located hundreds of kilometers off the coast of West Africa. Every island was born from volcanic eruptions deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean. Towering peaks, black lava fields, dramatic cliffs, and rugged coastlines are reminders that this nation was literally forged by fire. Isolation, harsh terrain, limited freshwater, and powerful Atlantic winds made these islands one of the most challenging places for humans to settle. Yet somehow, people not only survived here, they created a unique culture, a resilient society, and a country that would one day capture the world's attention. So, perhaps the real story of Cape Verde isn't about football at all. It's about how a place that once had no people became a nation that inspired millions. And that's exactly the journey we're about to discover together. Number 2. The harsh reality behind Cape Verde's beauty. If Cape Verde's incredible World Cup journey made you wonder how such a small nation could achieve so much, the answer begins with the place itself. Because if there is one thing that has shaped Cape Verde more than anything else, it is nature. And nature was never kind. Imagine standing on an island surrounded by endless blue ocean. Water stretches as far as your eyes can see, yet you can't drink a single drop of it. That has been the reality for generations of Cape Verdeans. Despite being an island nation in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, Cape Verde has almost no permanent rivers and very few natural freshwater sources. Rainfall is unpredictable, and in some years, entire regions receive only a fraction of the water they desperately need. For centuries, every drop of rain was precious. Families carefully collected rainwater, farmers watched the skies with hope, and long droughts often meant failed harvests and hunger. But water isn't the only challenge. Every year, another unexpected visitor arrives from thousands of kilometers away. Fine dust from the Sahara Desert is carried by powerful trade winds across the Atlantic Ocean. After traveling more than 2,000 kilometers, the dust reaches Cape Verde, sometimes turning the sky hazy and reducing visibility. Locals even have a name for this dry, dusty wind: the harmattan. It reminds everyone that even the world's largest desert can leave its mark on these distant islands. As if that weren't enough, the islands themselves were born from fire. Cape Verde is an archipelago created entirely by volcanic activity. Towering volcanic peaks dominate the landscape, and on the island of Fogo, the volcano is still active today. Powerful Atlantic winds sweep across the islands year-round, while prolonged droughts have shaped the land for centuries. Thin soil, limited freshwater, strong winds, and volcanic terrain make farming incredibly difficult compared with many other parts of the world. If you looked only at the environment, you might think this was one of the last places where people would choose to build a home. And yet, they did. Generation after generation, Cape Verdeans learned to adapt instead of giving up. They collected every drop of water farmed on volcanic soil, built communities where nature offered few advantages, and slowly transformed these harsh islands into a place they proudly call home. So, here's a question. If you had been one of the first settlers arriving here hundreds of years ago, facing drought, volcanic mountains, fierce winds, and almost no fresh water, would you have stayed? Because the people who did were about to face an even greater challenge. One that would forever change the history of Cape Verde and leave scars that can still be felt today. Number 3. The island where families disappeared. Now imagine that you've survived the droughts, the volcanic landscapes, and the unforgiving climate of Cape Verde. Just when you think the hardest challenge is nature, human history arrives, and it is far more devastating. In the 15th century, what had once been an empty volcanic archipelago quickly became one of the most important ports in the Atlantic slave trade. Its strategic location between West Africa, Europe, and the Americas made Cape Verde a perfect stopping point for ships crossing the ocean. At the heart of this story was the town of Saddest. Today, it is a peaceful UNESCO World Heritage Site where colorful houses overlook the sea and narrow stone streets welcome visitors from around the world. But centuries ago, these same streets echoed with fear, grief, and uncertainty. To understand what happened here, imagine one young father standing on the shore. He doesn't know where the ship is going. He doesn't know if he will ever see his wife again. He reaches out one last time toward his children as they disappear into the crowd. They cry out for him, but the distance grows with every step. Within minutes, a family that had shared a lifetime together is torn apart forever. This scene is fictional, but stories like it were tragically repeated countless times. Historians estimate that hundreds of thousands of enslaved Africans passed through Cape Verde during the centuries of the Atlantic slave trade. Many were taken from their homes along the West African coast, held on these islands, and then forced onto ships bound for distant lands across the Atlantic. For many, Cape Verde became the last piece of African soil they would ever see. People later described places like this as a door of no return. It wasn't an official gate or a single building. It was a painful symbol, a point where countless lives crossed into an uncertain future, with almost no hope of ever returning home. The tragedy of Cape Verde wasn't only the number of people who passed through its ports. It was the silence that followed. Families vanished. Names were forgotten. Languages faded. Entire generations were separated by an ocean they could never cross again. And yet history didn't end there. From unimaginable suffering, something unexpected slowly began to emerge. African traditions blended with Portuguese influences. New languages were born. Music, food, beliefs, and customs evolved into a culture unlike any other in the world. Cape Verde would never erase the pain of its past, but somehow its people found a way to transform sorrow into identity. And perhaps that is the greatest miracle of all. Because the next chapter of this story isn't about slavery. It's about how a nation with no indigenous people became a people with one of the strongest cultural identities in the Atlantic. Number 4. How strangers became one. People, most nations begin with a common ancestry, a shared language, a shared history. Cape Verde began with none of those. When the first settlers arrived on these volcanic islands in the 15th century, there were no indigenous people waiting to welcome them. Instead, the population grew from two very different worlds. Portuguese settlers came from Europe, while enslaved Africans were brought from the mainland. They spoke different languages, followed different traditions, and carried completely different memories of home. At first, these differences reflected inequality and suffering. But over generations, something extraordinary happened. Instead of remaining divided forever, the people of Cape Verde slowly created an entirely new identity. A new language emerged, Cape Verdean Creole. It blended Portuguese vocabulary with African linguistic roots, becoming the language of everyday life. Music carried rhythms from West Africa while embracing European melodies. Traditional dishes combined ingredients and cooking techniques from both continents. Even family custom celebrations and ways of seeing the world became something that belonged to neither Europe nor Africa alone. Cape Verde did not simply borrow two cultures. It transformed them into something entirely its own. Today, many Cape Verdeans proudly describe themselves as Creole, not as a compromise between two identities, but as a unique identity born on these islands. It is a reminder that culture is not something fixed. It evolves, adapts, and grows through the lives of ordinary people. Perhaps that is one of Cape Verde's greatest lessons. A nation does not have to begin with a single bloodline or a single origin to become a family. Sometimes people from different worlds can build something even stronger together. And as this new nation slowly found its identity, its people would soon face another challenge. One not of survival or history, but of carrying the spirit of Cape Verde far beyond the shores of these small Atlantic islands. Number 5. The country that exported its greatest treasure. Most countries measure their population by the people living within their borders. Cape Verde tells a very different story. Today, more people of Cape Verdean descent live abroad than on the islands themselves. From the United States and Portugal to the Netherlands, France, and beyond, generations have left in search of better opportunities, often driven by drought-limited resources and a lack of jobs at home. For such a small nation, this is an astonishing reality. In many ways, Cape Verde is not just a country in the Atlantic, it is a global community spread across continents. Yet distance has never erased identity. Walk through Cape Verdean neighborhoods in cities like Boston, Rotterdam, or Lisbon, and you will still hear Cape Verdean Creole spoken in homes, restaurants, and family gatherings. Traditional music fills community festivals. Familiar recipes are passed from grandparents to grandchildren, and national holidays continue to be celebrated with pride. Even children born thousands of miles from the islands often grow up knowing where their family came from. Have you ever met someone whose roots were in a country you knew almost nothing about? Sometimes, the smallest nations leave the biggest impressions. The connection goes far beyond culture. Every year, thousands of Cape Verdeans living overseas send money back to parents, siblings, and relatives on the islands. These remittances help families pay for education, healthcare, housing, and small businesses. For decades, money earned abroad has been one of the country's most important economic lifelines, supporting local communities during difficult times and creating opportunities that might not otherwise exist. In Cape Verde, success overseas is rarely seen as an individual achievement. It is often shared with the family waiting back home. What makes this story remarkable is that migration never weakened the nation, it strengthened it. Instead of disappearing into larger societies, Cape Verdeans carried their language, music traditions, and values wherever they settled. At the same time, they remained emotionally and economically connected to the islands that shaped them. Their homeland may be small on a map, but its influence stretches far beyond its shores through the people who continue to represent it around the world. Perhaps that is Cape Verde's greatest surprise yet. A country with only a little more than 500,000 residents has built a worldwide family that numbers far beyond its own population. Its greatest export was never gold, oil, or diamonds. It was its people. And wherever they went, they carried a piece of Cape Verde with them, proving that a nation's true size is measured not only by its land, but by the strength of the bonds its people refuse to break. Number 6. Imagine rebuilding your house on an active volcano. If most people had to choose a place to build a home, the side of an active volcano would probably be the last option. But on the island of Fogo, that is exactly what thousands of people have done for generations. Rising nearly 2,830 meters above the Atlantic Ocean, Pico de Fogo is the highest point in Cape Verde, and it is still an active volcano. From a distance, it looks majestic. Up close, it is a constant reminder that the ground beneath your feet could change without warning. Every family living here understands one simple truth: the mountain that gives them life could also take it away. That fear became reality more than once. The most devastating recent eruption occurred in 2014, when rivers of glowing lava slowly flowed across the landscape, swallowing everything in their path. Entire villages, including Saddest calderas, were buried beneath thick layers of hardened rock. Homes disappeared. Schools vanished. Vineyards that families had cared for over generations were destroyed in just a few days. Thousands of people were forced to leave with little more than what they could carry. For many communities around the world, that would have marked the end, but not here. Instead of abandoning the volcano forever, many residents returned as soon as it was safe. They rebuilt their homes, reopened small businesses, and planted new crops on land that had only recently been covered by lava. To outsiders, the decision seems almost impossible to understand. Why risk everything again? Yet for the people of Fogo, this mountain is more than a threat. It is their history, their livelihood, and the place they call home. What would you do if the place you loved most could also destroy everything you owned? Perhaps the greatest surprise is what grows from the ashes. Volcanic soil, despite its violent origin, is rich in minerals that help produce exceptional grapes. Today, vineyards spread across the slopes of Fogo, and local winemakers produce wines celebrated for their distinctive flavor, shaped by the island's unique volcanic landscape. Every bottle tells a remarkable story, not just of agriculture, but of resilience. The very lava that once buried homes now nourishes new life. That is the extraordinary contradiction of Cape Verde. Here, destruction and creation exist side by side. Fire becomes fertile soil. Disaster becomes opportunity. Fear becomes determination. Pico de Fogo is not simply a volcano, it is a symbol of a nation that refuses to let hardship define its future. Because the people of Cape Verde have learned a lesson that few places on Earth understand so deeply. Sometimes, the greatest opportunities are hidden in the very challenges that seem impossible to overcome. Number 7. This ocean has a giant blue eye. After everything we've discovered so far, drought volcanoes, slavery, and extraordinary resilience, you might expect Cape Verde to be defined only by hardship. But then the islands reveal another side, one that feels almost unreal. On the island of Sal lies one of Cape Verde's most extraordinary natural wonders, the salt crater of Pedra de Lume. Instead of sitting beside the ocean, this brilliant white salt lake rests inside the crater of an extinct volcano. As visitors step into the crystal clear water, something unexpected happens. They begin to float effortlessly. The water is so rich in salt that it creates an experience often compared to the Dead Sea. Standing inside a volcano while floating on a salt lake sounds like science fiction, yet it is one of Cape Verde's most unforgettable experiences. Nature destroyed this volcano long ago, only to transform it into something beautiful. Then, there is one of the Atlantic Ocean's best-kept secrets, the blue eye. Hidden among the volcanic rocks on the island of São Vicente, this natural sea cave appears ordinary for most of the day. But when the sunlight reaches the opening at just the right angle, the water suddenly glows with an intense sapphire blue, creating the illusion of a giant human eye staring up from beneath the sea. For only a short window each day, the Atlantic seems to come alive. It is one of those places that almost looks too perfect to be real, reminding visitors that nature is also an artist. Perhaps the greatest surprise, however, is that no two islands feel the same. Travel across Cape Verde, and it almost feels like crossing between different countries. One island is covered with black volcanic landscapes that resemble another planet. Another offers endless golden beaches and shifting sand dunes carried from the Sahara Desert. Elsewhere, lush green valleys climb into misty mountains, while dramatic cliffs plunge into the deep blue Atlantic. It is difficult to believe that all of these landscapes belong to one small nation scattered across the ocean. This extraordinary diversity is one of Cape Verde's greatest treasures. Every island has its own personality, its own rhythm, and its own story waiting to be discovered. Together, they prove that beauty often grows in the most unexpected places. Perhaps that is Cape Verde's greatest paradox. The same volcanic forces that once created danger also created breathtaking beauty. The same isolated islands that once seemed forgotten now offer some of the Atlantic's most spectacular landscapes. And in the next chapter, we'll discover how the people of these islands transformed not only hardship into hope, but also sadness into music that would touch the entire world. Number 8. The saddest music in the world came from here. Not every country leaves its mark through wealth, military power, or political influence. Some change the world with nothing more than a voice. For Cape Verde, that voice belonged to Cesaria Evora. Long before she became an international music icon, she was simply a singer, performing in small bars along the harbor of Mindillo. For years, she struggled to make a living, often singing for little or no money. There were times when she disappeared from the music scene altogether, believing her dream had come to an end. Success arrived late. She was already in her 40s when the world finally discovered the extraordinary beauty of her voice. Before long, she was performing on the greatest concert stages across Europe, America, and Asia. The woman once known only in Cape Verde became the voice that introduced millions of people to a country they had never heard of. But what truly captivated audiences wasn't just her voice. It was the music itself. The songs she performed belonged to a uniquely Cape Verdean tradition called Morna. Slow, emotional, and deeply poetic, Morna is often compared to the Portuguese fado or the American blues. Yet it has a soul entirely its own. Its melodies carry echoes of Africa, Europe, and the Atlantic Ocean, while its lyrics speak of love, longing, separation, and the bittersweet feeling of leaving home. In Cape Verde, there is even a word for this emotion, saudade. It describes the profound longing for someone or somewhere that may never return. Few musical traditions express this feeling as honestly as Morna. Perhaps that is why Morna resonates so deeply with Cape Verdeans living around the world. For a people whose families are scattered across continents, music became far more than entertainment. It became memory, a bridge connecting grandparents in Praia with grandchildren in Boston, a reminder that no matter how far they traveled, the islands were never truly left behind. Wherever Cape Verdeans gathered, Morna traveled with them, carrying the language, history, and emotions of their homeland across oceans. Today, the music of Cape Verde is recognized far beyond its shores, and Morna has earned international recognition as part of humanity's cultural heritage. Yet its greatest achievement cannot be measured by awards or global fame. It gave an entire nation a voice. A tiny country that many people couldn't find on a map managed to make the world stop, listen, and feel. Because sometimes the strongest legacy a nation can leave isn't written in history books. It's sung from the heart. Number 9. This country shouldn't exist, but it's thriving. When people think about national success, they often think about natural wealth, oil, gold, diamonds, or vast fertile land. But Cape Verde challenges that idea in every possible way. This is a country with almost no major natural resources. There is no oil industry, no large mineral deposits, very limited fresh water. And yet, despite all of this, Cape Verde is consistently recognized as one of the most stable and democratic nations in Africa. For decades, many countries have struggled with political instability and economic inequality, driven by resource dependence. Cape Verde chose a different path. Instead of relying on what the land could provide, it focused on building strong institutions, education, and governance. Elections are held regularly, power transitions peacefully, and trust in public systems remains relatively strong compared to many nations of similar size and geography. In a continent often defined by instability narratives, Cape Verde quietly became an exception. But perhaps the most impressive transformation comes from necessity itself. With very limited freshwater sources, Cape Verde had to rethink survival. Rather than seeing water scarcity as a permanent limitation, the country began investing in solutions. Desalination plants now help convert seawater into drinkable water, ensuring that communities can access what nature does not easily provide. At the same time, the nation has turned toward renewable energy, especially wind and solar power, to reduce dependence on imported fuels and create a more sustainable future. These innovations did not emerge from abundance. They emerged from scarcity, and that is what makes them remarkable. Cape Verde proves that progress does not always begin with natural advantage. Sometimes it begins with constraint, with necessity, with the refusal to accept limitation as destiny. In a world where many nations measure their worth by what they extract from the earth, Cape Verde offers a different definition of value, one built not on resources but on resilience, creativity, and collective will. And perhaps that is the real lesson. A country's strength is not only what it has, it is what it chooses to become. Number 10, the real secret of this country isn't what you think. After everything we've seen, the droughts, the volcanoes, the history of loss, the scattered diaspora, and the unexpected beauty, you might think Cape Verde's story is defined by geography or luck, or even isolation. But it isn't. Because if you strip everything away, the beaches, the mountains, the music, even the World Cup moments, what remains is something far more powerful. People. Cape Verde did not begin as a nation with advantages. It began as a place that should have struggled to survive at every step. No abundant freshwater, no major natural resources, a harsh climate, a fragile environment in the middle of the Atlantic. And yet, instead of disappearing into history, it became something else entirely. It became a story of adaptation. Over centuries, people learned not just to survive these islands, but to reshape them into a home. They built communities where nature offered little comfort. They created culture where there was fragmentation. They turned isolation into connection, and they transformed limitation into identity. That is why Cape Verde feels so different from many other places. It is not defined by what the land gives. It is defined by what people do when the land gives them almost nothing. The truth is, mountains do not create resilience. Volcanoes do not create culture. Oceans do not create identity. These are only the stage. The real story has always been written by those who lived through them. And that is why Cape Verde matters. Not because it is the most beautiful archipelago in the Atlantic. Not because it has surprising football achievements or world-famous music. But because it proves something simple and powerful. A nation is not defined by nature's generosity. It is defined by human response to adversity. Cape Verde is, in the end, a reminder that even in the most unlikely places, people can build meaning, identity, and pride. And perhaps the most important question this story leaves us with is not about Cape Verde at all. It is about us. If placed in the same circumstances, would we also find a way to turn hardship into something worth remembering?